The dining room was silent when my daughter, Kendall, rose from her chair. All eyes turned toward her, as if she owned the stage, the leading lady in a performance I hadn't known I was attending. Her voice came out thick, with the tone she had perfected over the years, the one she used to intimidate and dominate any conversation. "We're not going to continue supporting you," she announced. Just like that, without preamble, without softening the blow. She looked me directly in the eye as she said it, as if to ensure every syllable sank deep. I was sitting in the corner of the table, the furthest spot from the head, almost like a last-minute guest in my own home. My hands rested calmly on my lap, though a stirring had begun deep inside me. I didn't say a word. I just watched her. Kendall wore a black designer dress that surely cost more than I spent in an entire month. Her husband, Marcus Hayes, stood beside her with his arms crossed, and that crooked smirk he always wore when he felt superior. Across the table was my son, Devin, leaning back in his chair with the arrogant posture he had adopted since marrying Gabrielle Gabby. Gabby sat next to him, perfectly styled, with impeccable nails and a cold expression that never thawed, not even when she greeted me. No one spoke after Kendall. It was as if they had all rehearsed this moment, knowing exactly what role they were meant to play. I remained in my spot, observing, feeling the weight of their gazes fall upon me. There was a dense atmosphere, like the heavy air before a severe thunderstorm. But I didn't move or react. I simply let the moment unfold because I knew this scene was just beginning. Kendall sat back down but didn't stop staring. She had a look of satisfaction on her face, as if she had just won something important. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder in a gesture of support that seemed practiced, calculated. Devin let out a short, almost mocking laugh, and Gabby nodded slightly, as if affirming everything that had just happened. I am 67 years old. I've lived long enough to recognize when someone is playing games, testing your limits, or believing you have no defense left. My children thought I was weak. They thought I was dependent on them, that I couldn't survive without their help. How wrong they were. But of course, they didn't know that yet, and I was in no hurry to reveal it. I stayed seated, still, my hands resting on my lap, as I felt the faint vibration of my cell phone in my jacket pocket. I didn't take it out or look at the screen. I just felt it there, reminding me of the things they were completely unaware of. The table was elegantly set. Expensive china, crystal glasses, precisely folded cloth napkins, all paid for with money they believed was theirs, all sustained by a system I had quietly built, without fanfare or the need to remind them who had made every one of these luxuries possible. Kendall picked up her wine glass and took a long sip, savoring it as if it were a celebration. Marcus did the same. Devin leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and looked at me with that mixture of pity and disdain that always hurt me so much. "Mom," he said, his voice measured, "I think it's time you understood the situation. We have our own families, our own responsibilities. We can't keep carrying you." Carrying. That was the word he used, as if I were a heavy burden they had been lugging around, as if my existence was a nuisance that needed to be resolved. Gabby nodded again, this time with more emphasis. "It's what's best for everyone," she added in the soft voice she used to disguise her iciness. "You have to be realistic. You're not young anymore. You need to accept that things have changed." I stared at her, not out of anger or sadness, but simple curiosity. I wondered if they truly believed what they were saying, or if they were merely following a script they had prepared together. Kendall spoke again. "Starting today, we're not paying for your prescriptions, your groceries, or the upkeep of this house anymore. It's your responsibility now." The silence that followed was thick. I could hear the tick-tock of the clock on the wall, the slight creak of the floorboards when someone shifted their feet. But no one spoke. They all watched me, waiting for me to plead, to break down, to show weakness. But I only nodded slightly, as if processing the information, as if assimilating my new reality, and in part, I was. Only my reality was very different from the one they imagined. My phone vibrated again, this time a little more insistent. I felt it against my side, reminding me that a message was waiting. But I still didn't move. I wanted to see how far they were willing to go. Marcus cleared his throat. "Eleanor," he said, using my name with a familiarity I found grating. "You understand this isn't personal, right? It's simply a practical matter. We have expenses, too, commitments. We can't sustain 2 households." 2 households. As if this house wasn't mine, as if they were paying for something I couldn't cover. The irony was so immense that I almost wanted to laugh, but I held back. Devin added, "Besides, Mom, it's time you learned to fend for yourself. You can't depend on us forever." Fend for yourself. Dependence. They spoke as if I were a burden they were finally shedding, as if my existence were a problem they needed to resolve once and for all. Gabby glanced at her watch, a subtle but clear gesture. She was in a hurry. They were all in a hurry. This meeting was just a formality, a necessary step before moving on with their perfect lives, their paid-for luxuries, their full bank accounts. I still said nothing, just observed them. Kendall sighed, as if tired of waiting for my response. "You have nothing to say?" she asked, with that cultivated air of superiority. I looked her straight in the eyes, and for the first time all evening, I spoke. "No," I said in a calm voice. "I have nothing to say." That seemed to surprise them. Kendall frowned. Devin exchanged a look with Gabby. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I think they expected tears, expected pleas, expected me to crumble right there in front of them so they could feel justified in their decision, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I remained seated with my back straight, my hands still, my eyes fixed on each of them. Inside, however, something was changing. Something was waking up, a strength I had kept dormant for too long. Kendall set her glass down with a dry clink that echoed across the room. It was a calculated gesture, designed to seize attention, to make a point. "Fine," she said, using the authoritative tone she had perfected. "Since you seem to understand the situation, let's make it completely clear how things will be from now on." She leaned back in her chair, crossed her legs, and looked at me as if I were an employee about to receive orders. Marcus smiled complacently beside her. Devin and Gabby looked at each other briefly before nodding, giving her permission to continue. "First," Kendall began, raising one finger, "starting next Monday, we are canceling the monthly transfer we make for your expenses. We will not be depositing another dime into your account." She paused, waiting for a reaction from me. I didn't twitch a muscle. I just watched her intently, memorizing every gesture, every word. "Second," she continued, raising another finger, "the prescriptions you need for your blood pressure and heart are now your problem. We won't pay for them anymore. If you want to keep taking them, you'll have to find a way to cover the cost yourself." Gabby intervened then, with that soft voice she used to appear reasonable. "We just can't keep doing this, Eleanor. Your meds cost almost $480. $480 a month. That's a lot of money. Money we could be using for our own children, for our own needs. Our own children, as if I hadn't been the one who raised them, who stayed up all night when they were sick, who worked to give them everything they needed." But I said nothing. I only nodded slightly, as if agreeing with her reasoning. Devin took his turn. "And the groceries, Mom? We're not paying for your groceries anymore either. You spend too much on food you probably don't even finish. It's a waste." He looked at me as if he were doing me a favor by pointing it out. "You need to learn to manage your money better. Buy only what's necessary and live with less." Live with less. How easy that was to say when they lived surrounded by luxuries they hadn't even earned. Marcus added, "And this house, Eleanor. This house is too big for you alone. The maintenance expenses are huge. The gardener, the cleaning service, the repairs. We've been paying for all of that for years." Kendall took back control of the conversation. "Exactly. This house is far too big for you. You should consider moving to something smaller, more manageable. A modest apartment where you won't have so many expenses, where you can live within your means without depending on us." A modest apartment. They were telling me to leave the house where I had lived for over 30 years, where I had raised my children, where every corner held a memory. And they said it so casually, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. "It's not that we want to kick you out," Devin added with a smile that tried to look sympathetic, but only succeeded in looking phony. "It's just that you need to understand you are no longer our responsibility. We gave you everything for years. We supported you, we took care of you, but enough is enough. It's time for everyone to take charge of their own lives." Take charge of their own lives. The irony was so profound that I had to bite my lip not to smile. If only they knew what I knew. If only they had the slightest idea who was really supporting whom. Gabby pulled out her phone and started scrolling through the screen. "In fact," she said without looking up, "we calculated how much we've spent on you over the last 5 years. Between prescriptions, groceries, house maintenance, utilities, and other things, we've invested nearly $200,000 in you." She looked up and pierced me with her eyes. $200,000, Eleanor. Do you realize what that means? That's money we could have used to invest, to travel, to give our children better education. Marcus nodded emphatically. "It's a huge amount, and we've never asked for anything in return. We've never complained, but enough is enough. We can't keep sacrificing ourselves for you." Sacrificing. That was the word he used. As if maintaining me had been an unbearable martyrdom, as if I were a cross they had patiently carried against their will. My phone vibrated again in my pocket, this time more insistent. I felt the vibration against my side, long and clear. It was likely an important message, but I still didn't move. I wanted to hear everything they had to say. I wanted them to completely empty themselves out before I acted. Kendall continued, "And one more thing, Mom. That car you drive, we paid for that too. The insurance, the maintenance, the gas, everything. Well, no more. We're canceling the insurance next week. If you want to keep driving it, you'll have to pay for everything yourself." Devin laughed, a short, contemptuous sound. "Though honestly, I don't know how you'll pay for car insurance when you can't even pay for your own meds." Gabby also smiled. Marcus took a sip of his wine, relishing the moment. "You understand what we're telling you, right?" Kendall asked, leaning forward. "It's not that we hate you or want to see you fail. It's simply that we can't keep taking care of you. You're an adult. It's time you face the consequences of your own life." The consequences of my own life, as if I had been irresponsible, as if I hadn't worked every day of my existence to give them everything they had, as if I hadn't been the one who built this empire they now believed was theirs. Marcus added, "And frankly, Eleanor, you should be grateful for everything we've done for you so far. Not many mothers have such generous children. You should appreciate it more." Grateful. They wanted me to be grateful for the crumbs they had given me with money that was actually mine. They wanted me to thank them for humiliating me in my own house. The situation was so absurd that for a moment I felt a strange calm settle over me, an absolute certainty that this was about to change in a way they couldn't imagine. Kendall stood up again, walked toward the window, and looked out at the perfectly manicured lawn I had designed years ago. "This house could sell for a lot of money," she said without turning to look at me. "In the current market, it could easily be worth $1.7 million, $1.7 million, maybe more. It's a beautiful property in an exclusive North End district neighborhood." She turned and looked directly at me. "It would be a shame to waste it by keeping it just for one person who can't even handle the basic expenses." Devin stood up as well. "Mom, what Kendall is trying to say is that you should consider selling this house, moving to something simpler, and with the money you get from the sale, you could live comfortably for the rest of your days without having to depend on us." Gabby added, "It would be the most sensible, the most practical thing. Everyone wins." Everyone wins, of course. They wanted me to sell the house so they could get their hands on part of the money. It was obvious, so obvious it was almost comical. My phone vibrated one last time. This time, it was a different, shorter vibration, an additional notification. 2 messages waiting. I reached into my pocket and slowly took it out. Everyone fell silent, watching me. Kendall frowned. "What are you doing?" she asked, sounding annoyed. I looked at the screen. 2 messages from Olivia Chen, my attorney, my trusted manager, the person who had handled all my assets for over 20 years. I opened the first message. It read, "Mrs. Shaw, approved the monthly transfer of $12,000 that your children requested for their personal expenses. $12,000. That's what each couple received every month from my account. Money I authorized without question, money they squandered on luxuries while telling me they couldn't afford to support me." I opened the second message, awaiting your confirmation to process the payment before month-end closing. I looked up. All 4 of them were staring at me with different expressions. Kendall looked irritated. Devin was curious. Marcus and Gabby were impatient. None of them had any idea what I had just read. None suspected what was coming. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked at them all calmly. "Continue," I said softly. "You're not finished talking yet." Kendall looked at me with confusion for a moment, as if she hadn't expected me to tell her to keep going, but she quickly regained her composure and sat back down in her chair with that air of superiority that characterized her. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "Since you insist on continuing, let's be completely clear about everything." Marcus nodded beside her, adjusting the expensive watch on his wrist, the watch that probably cost more than $10,000, and looked like a trophy he'd earned through his own efforts. "Starting now," Kendall declared firmly, "we will not be responsible for any of your expenses. Not prescriptions, not groceries, not utilities, not maintenance, nothing, absolutely nothing." She paused for her words to have the desired effect. If something breaks in the house, you fix it. If you run out of food, you buy it. If you need to see a doctor, you pay for the visit. Is that clear? I nodded slightly, without changing my expression. Inside, however, I felt a strange calm, a certainty that this moment would be etched in their memories forever. Devin leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "And Mom, this is non-negotiable. This is not something we are discussing with you. It's a decision we've already made, all 4 of us." He gestured to Kendall, Marcus, Gabby, and himself. "We talked about it, we decided, and it's final." Gabby added with the voice that tried to sound sweet, but only managed to be condescending. "We hope you understand and don't take it personally. It's simply that we also have the right to live our lives without this constant burden." Constant burden. There was that word again. As if I had been dead weight all these years. As if my existence were a nuisance they had endured with the patience of saints. Marcus spoke up. "Besides, Eleanor, you have to be realistic. You're not the age to keep living in a house this size. You should be in a smaller, more manageable place, a place where you don't need help with anything." Kendall nodded emphatically. "Exactly. You could look into one of those senior living apartments. There are some really nice ones. With security, with included services, you'd be much better off there than here, alone in this huge house." Senior living. As if I were already in a nursing home, as if at 67 I had lost all capacity. Devin stood up and walked toward the cabinet where the liquor bottles were kept. He poured himself a whiskey without asking if I wanted anything. "And one more thing, Mom," he said while pouring. "That money you keep in the bank, whatever it is, we recommend you manage it very carefully, because when it runs out, don't come to us for help. We're warning you now." He took a sip of his drink and looked at me with an expression that tried to be serious, but only managed to look arrogant. Gabby pulled out her phone again and started scrolling. "In fact, we did a little research and found several apartments that could work for you. Small, 1-bedroom units in decent areas. Some cost around $1,500, $1,500 a month in rent." She looked up at me. "With whatever savings you have, you could live there for a while. Modestly, of course, but you could live." Modestly. What an interesting word coming from someone carrying a handbag that cost $3,000. $3,000. And shoes probably worth another $1,000. Kendall took back control of the conversation, as she always did. "Look, Mom, we don't want to sound cruel, but it's necessary for you to understand reality. We are no longer responsible for you. We've done our part. We gave you everything we could for years, but enough is enough. It's time for everyone to go their own way." Marcus added, "And honestly, you should thank us for everything we've done. Not many children would be as patient as we've been." Patient, as if allowing me to exist in my own house was an act of generosity on their part. Devin returned to the table with his whiskey in hand. "And we're going to tell you this now, Mom, so there are no misunderstandings later. If you ever have an emergency, if you get sick, or if you need something urgent, don't call us. We won't answer. We won't come running to save you." Gabby nodded. "It's harsh, we know, but it's necessary. It's the only way for you to learn to be independent." Independent. They spoke of independence while living completely dependent on money that wasn't even theirs. Kendall stood up once more and walked over to where I was sitting. She stopped beside me, looking down. "Do you have anything to say now? Any questions? Any comments?" I looked up at her, calm and serene. "No," I replied softly. "I have nothing to say." That seemed to frustrate her. She had expected tears, pleas, desperation, but I didn't give her any of it. Only calm, only silence. Kendall took a step back and looked at the others. "Fine, then it's decided. Starting tomorrow, there's no more help, no more money, no more anything." Marcus stood up too and stretched as if he had just finished a heavy job. "I'm glad we finally talked about this," he said with a smile. "These conversations are never easy, but they're necessary." Devin finished his whiskey in one gulp and set the glass on the table. "Yeah, it was time. We've been putting this off for years." Gabby put her phone in her purse and fixed her hair. "Well, we have to go. We have plans tonight." Plans. Of course they had plans. Plans paid for with money they thought was theirs. Kendall picked up her handbag from the back of the chair. "We're leaving, Mom. I hope you reflect on everything we told you, and I hope you make the right decisions." She patted my shoulder condescendingly, almost mockingly. Marcus and Gabby were already walking toward the door. Devin looked at me one last time. "Take care, Mom, and remember, you can't count on us anymore." With that, he turned and followed the others. I heard them walk down the hall. I heard the front door open and close. I heard the sound of their car engines starting, expensive luxury cars, paid for with the money from the monthly transfer I authorized every single month. I remained seated at the table alone, amidst the silence they had left behind. The wine glasses were still on the table, the plates untouched. Everything was exactly the same as before, except now they were gone, convinced that they had left me destroyed, humiliated, and out of options. But they knew nothing. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. I took my phone out of my pocket and reread the message from Olivia Chen. "Approved the monthly transfer of $12,000 that your children requested for their personal expenses. That was the amount they expected to receive, as they did every month, the money they used to maintain their luxuries, their whims, their perfect lives." I opened the keyboard and typed a single word. One word that would change everything. One word they never expected to hear. Denied. I hit send, and the message went out. A single word that traveled across the screen to Olivia Chen. Denied. That simple, that forceful. I set the phone on the table and leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath for the first time all evening. The silence of the house no longer felt heavy. On the contrary, it felt liberating, as if I could finally breathe without the weight of their gazes, without the pressure of their demands, without the constant humiliation of their comments. I slowly got up and walked toward the window. Outside, the city lights sparkled in the distance. The lawn was dark, but I could make out the shapes of the trees I had planted myself years ago. This house was mine, every corner, every detail, every memory, and they had the audacity to suggest I sell it, move to a small apartment, and live with less. The irony was so profound that now I allowed myself to smile. My phone vibrated on the table. A message from Olivia. I picked it up and read, "Received, Mrs. Shaw. Transfer canceled. Would you like me to proceed with the other actions we discussed last week?" The other actions. Yes, Olivia and I had talked about several things. We had planned different scenarios, but I never thought we would reach this point. I never imagined my own children would be capable of treating me this way. However, here we were. I typed my response, "Not yet, wait for my signal." She replied almost immediately, "Understood. I will be attentive." I put the phone away and returned to my chair. I sat down again in front of the empty table, in front of the wine glasses they had left, in front of the untouched plates. I had to think. I had to carefully plan my next moves, because what was coming was not just a lesson. It was a complete transformation of the family dynamic. I closed my eyes for a moment and remembered. I remembered when Kendall was small and ran through this very room chasing imaginary butterflies. I remembered when Devin took his first steps holding my hand. I remembered the nights I rocked them when they had nightmares. I remembered every sacrifice, every hour of overtime, every dream I postponed so they could have everything they needed. And now, decades later, this was how they repaid me, with scorn, arrogance, and cruelty. But I couldn't afford to fall into nostalgia. No. Now I had work to do. I opened my eyes and looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9 o'clock at night. In a few more hours, around midnight, the banking system would process the automatic monthly transfers, and for the first time in years, my children would not receive their monthly deposit. For the first time, their accounts would be without the money they took for granted, and that's where everything would begin. I got up and started clearing the table. I took the wine glasses one by one and carried them to the kitchen. I washed each one carefully without rushing. Then I gathered the plates and put them away. I wiped the table with a damp cloth until it was spotless. Every movement was calm, methodical, almost meditative. As I cleaned, I thought about every step I would take next, every word I would say when they came to confront me. Because they would come. Oh yes, they would come. When I finished cleaning, I turned off the living room lights and walked up the stairs to my bedroom. My footsteps echoed in the silence of the house, a house they said was too big for me, a house they said I should sell, a house that was, in reality, the center of the entire estate I controlled. I entered my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I took my phone again and opened the banking application. I reviewed the accounts. Everything was in order. Everything was under my control. There was a main account, the trust account, where the bulk of the family assets were deposited. $4.5 million, $4,500,000. That was the current amount. Money I had accumulated through years of work, smart investments, and sound decisions. Money my children believed they would automatically inherit one day. Money I could actually manage as I wished, because the trust was in my name. I was the sole administrator. I had all the decision-making power. Then there were the secondary accounts, the accounts from which the monthly transfers were made to each of my children. $12,000 for Kendall and Marcus, $12,000. $12,000 for Devin and Gabby, $24,000 monthly that came out of my pocket, which they spent without remorse while telling me they couldn't support me anymore. The hypocrisy was so great it was almost comical. I reviewed the transfer history, years and years of monthly payments without fail. I had never denied them anything. I had never questioned how they spent the money. I closed the app and put the phone on the nightstand. I lay down on the bed, still dressed, and looked at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be an interesting day, a very interesting day, because when they checked their accounts and saw that the deposit hadn't arrived, they would start to worry. They would call the bank, check their statements, and slowly begin to understand that something had changed, that the game was over, that the mother they had humiliated held more power than they ever imagined. I closed my eyes but couldn't sleep. My mind was too active, too alert. I thought of their faces when they discovered the truth. I thought of their reactions when they realized that everything they had depended on me, my signature, my approval, my will. For years I had remained silent, allowing them to believe they were the providers, the generous ones, the ones keeping me afloat. But now that silence was broken, and what came next would change everything forever. The sun streamed through my bedroom window as it did every day, but this morning Everything felt different. I woke up early, before the alarm, with a clarity of mind I hadn't experienced in a long time. I got up, showered calmly, and dressed with care. I chose a simple but elegant pearl gray dress. I tied my hair back and put on the pearl earrings my mother had given me decades ago. I wanted to look good. I wanted to look strong because today was the day everything would change. I went downstairs and brewed coffee. The aroma filled the kitchen as I poured a cup and sat by the window. Outside, the gardener was already working, pruning the hedges as he did every Wednesday. The gardener my children said I could no longer afford. I took a sip of coffee and smiled slightly. If they only knew. My phone rested on the table in silence. It was still early. There were no alarm signals from them yet, but I knew it wouldn't be long. Bank transfers were processed in the early morning. They must have noticed by now. It was 8:15 when the first message arrived. It was from Devin. "Mom, there's a problem with my account. Do you know anything about it?" I read it without replying. I left the phone on the table and continued drinking my coffee. 5 minutes later, another message. This time from Kendall. "I need to talk to you urgently. Call me." I didn't reply to that either. I took my time. I finished my coffee, washed the cup, and sat in the living room with a book. A book I wasn't really reading, but which gave me a perfect excuse to appear occupied. At exactly 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Insistent, repeated. Someone was pressing the button over and over. I calmly got up and walked to the door. I looked through the peephole. It was Kendall. Her face was distraught, her hair less composed than usual, and that barely contained panic she tried to disguise with anger was visible. I opened the door slowly. "Good morning," I said calmly. She practically shoved the door open to get inside. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice frantic. "What did you do with the money?" I closed the door behind her and looked at her without flinching. "What money are you talking about, Kendall?" She looked at me as if I were crazy. "The transfer money. It didn't arrive. I checked my account 3 times. I called the bank. They told me the transfer was canceled. Why did you cancel it?" I walked into the living room and sat down in my favorite chair. "I think you should sit down," I said, gesturing to the sofa. She didn't sit. She stood, trembling with rage. "I'm not sitting down. I want answers now." I clasped my hands in my lap and looked directly at her. "Last night, you told me you weren't going to support me anymore, that you wouldn't pay my expenses, that I was no longer your responsibility. Do you remember?" Kendall blinked. "And what does that have to do with our transfer?" I smiled slightly. "Everything, darling. It has everything to do with everything." Just then, the doorbell rang again. Kendall went to open it. It was Devin, accompanied by Gabby. Both had the same expression of worry and anger. "Mom," Devin said, entering without greeting me. "We need to talk to you seriously." The 3 of them stood in front of me, forming a kind of intimidating semicircle, or at least they tried to. But I didn't feel intimidated. On the contrary, I felt calmer than ever. "Speak," I said quietly. Devin ran his hand through his hair. "The monthly transfer didn't arrive for either of us, neither Kendall nor me. And when we called the bank, they told us you canceled the standing order." I nodded. "That's right, I canceled it." Gabby took a step forward. "Why would you do something like that? That money is for our monthly expenses. We have commitments, payments to make." "Commitments," I repeated slowly. "Payments to make. How interesting. Yesterday, you told me you didn't have the money to help me with my prescriptions, that you couldn't pay for my groceries, that you wouldn't take care of me. But it turns out you have commitments and payments to make." Kendall clenched her fists. "That's different, and you know it. We have families, we have real expenses. It's not the same." I tilted my head. "It's not the same? Explain the difference, please." Devin intervened, trying to sound reasonable. "Mom, look, maybe we were a little harsh yesterday. Maybe we said things that sounded wrong, but you can't cancel the transfer just like that. We count on that money. It's part of our monthly budget." I stood up slowly. The 3 of them instinctively took a step back. part of your monthly budget," I said, walking toward the window. $12,000 each. $24,000 total per month. Do you know how much that is a year? $288,000. $288,000. Almost $300,000 that you receive from me annually. Gabby paled. Kendall's mouth dropped open, but she said nothing. Devin swallowed hard. I turned around to face them. "But according to you, I'm the one living at your expense. I'm the burden. I'm the one who depends on you." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the tick-tock of the clock on the wall, the distant sound of the gardener working outside. Kendall was the first to recover. "That money is part of our advance inheritance. It always has been. Dad set it up that way before he passed away." I shook my head. "No, Kendall, your father didn't set any of that up. I did. I am the one who decided to give you that monthly allowance. I am the one who has been transferring that money all these years, and I am the one who can decide when it stops." Devin stepped forward. "But Mom, that money comes from the family trust, from the inheritance Dad left." I looked him squarely in the eye. "The trust is in my name, Devin. I am the sole administrator. Your father decided that. All the assets, all the accounts, all the properties, everything is under my control until the day I die." The expression on their faces changed gradually, from anger to confusion, from confusion to disbelief, from disbelief to something that looked very much like fear. Gabby was the one who asked, her voice trembling, "Are you saying all the money is in your name?" I nodded. "Not just the money, Gabby. This house, the investment properties, the savings accounts, the stocks, everything, absolutely everything." Kendall shook her head. "That can't be. We reviewed the documents when Dad died." "You reviewed what I allowed you to review," I replied calmly. "Your father's will was clear. Everything was placed in a trust in my name under my administration. You would receive your inheritance only upon my death, and only under the conditions I established at that time." I sat back down in my chair. "So, when you tell me you won't support me anymore, that you won't pay my expenses, that I'm no longer your responsibility, you are talking to the person who literally feeds you every month." Devin slumped onto the sofa. Gabby covered her face with her hands. Kendall was still standing, but she had lost all her arrogance. "This is a mistake," she muttered. "It has to be a mistake." Just then, the doorbell rang again. I got up and opened it. It was Marcus, Kendall's husband. He walked in with the same panicked look as the others. "What's going on?" he asked, looking at his wife. "Why didn't the money arrive?" I closed the door and returned to my spot. "Your wife can explain," I said quietly. Kendall looked at him with glassy eyes. "Mom canceled the transfer." Marcus turned to me. "Why would you do that? We depend on that money. We have the car payment, the country club fees, the credit cards." I looked at him blankly. "Then perhaps you should reconsider your expenses. Maybe you should learn to live on what you actually earn." He approached me, his expression threatening. "Listen, ma'am. I don't know what game you're playing, but that money is ours by right." "By right," I repeated. "How interesting. Yesterday, you told me I had no right to anything, that you wouldn't give me another dollar. But now, it turns out you have rights." Marcus opened his mouth to reply, but just then my phone rang. I picked it up and saw the name on the screen. Olivia Chen. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. "I have to take this call. It's important." I left the living room and went into my study, closing the door behind me. "Olivia," I said upon answering. Her professional voice came through the line. "Good morning, Mrs. Shaw. Is this a good time to talk?" "It's perfect," I replied. "Go ahead," she continued. "I've received 3 calls this morning from your daughter Kendall, your son Devin, and Mr. Hayes, all asking why the monthly transfer wasn't processed. I informed them it was canceled by your order, and that I am not authorized to disclose any further information." I smiled. Perfect. Thank you, Olivia. She paused before asking, "Do you want me to proceed with the next phase?" I looked toward the closed study door. I could hear my children's agitated voices arguing among themselves on the other side. "Yes," I said firmly. "Proceed with everything. I want it executed exactly as we planned." Olivia replied with her usual efficiency. "Understood. In an hour, you will have the documents in your email for review and electronic signature. Once signed, the changes will be effective immediately." I hung up the phone and stood in the study for a moment. I took a deep breath. What was coming next was irreversible, but they had made their decision yesterday, and I was making mine today. I returned to the living room with a firm step. The four of them were still there, huddled together as if planning their next strategy. When they saw me enter, they all fell silent. I sat down in my chair and looked at them one by one. "Sit down," I said, my voice quiet but authoritative. This time, they obeyed. Kendall and Marcus on the large sofa, Devin and Gabby on the armchair. They all looked at me with a mixture of confusion and fear I hadn't seen on their faces before. "Let's clarify a few things," I began. "And I want you to listen carefully because I will not repeat myself." None of them said anything, only watched me, waiting. "First, this house we are sitting in is in my name, not the trust's. I bought it with my own money before your father passed away. The deed says Eleanor Johnson Shaw. Just my name, no one else's." Kendall started to open her mouth, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." "Second," I continued, "the two properties you believe are family investments, the ones that rent for $3,500 each per month, those are also in my name. I receive those rents. I pay the taxes. I decide what to do with that money." Devin shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mom, we didn't know," I interrupted him. "Of course you didn't know because you never asked. You were never interested in how the family finances worked. All you cared about was receiving your money every month." Gabby spoke, her voice weak. "But the trust, Dad left the trust for everyone." I looked at her intently. "The trust exists, yes, and it currently holds $4.5 million, $4,500,000. But I am the sole administrator. I decide when it is distributed, to whom it is distributed, and in what amounts. Your father's will was very clear on that. He trusted my judgment. He trusted that I would know how to do the right thing." I stood up and walked toward the window again, and for years I did what I believed was right. I gave you a monthly allowance without asking, without conditions, without demanding anything in return. I turned to look at them. But yesterday, you decided I was a burden, that you wouldn't support me anymore, that I was no longer your responsibility. Kendall tried to speak. "Mom, we just wanted—" I raised my voice for the first time. "Do not interrupt me." She shut her mouth immediately. "Yesterday, you made a decision. Today, I am making mine. There will be no more monthly transfers. It's over. Finished." The silence that followed was crushing. Marcus turned pale. "But we have commitments. The car I drive cost $1,500. $1,500 a month. The club membership is $800. The credit cards." I cut him off. "Then sell the car. Cancel the membership. Pay off your credit cards with your own money, with what you earn from working." He looked at me in disbelief. "Are you serious?" I nodded. "Completely serious. As serious as when you told me yesterday you wouldn't pay for my prescriptions anymore." Devin stood up. "Mom, this is insane. You can't just cut us off like this. We need that money." I looked at him with a calm I didn't know I possessed. I needed my prescriptions. I needed groceries. I needed to know that my family had my back. But according to you, that didn't matter anymore. Gabby began to cry, silent tears rolling down her perfectly made-up cheeks. "Please," she whispered. "We have 2 children in private schools. We can't pay the tuition without that money." "Then perhaps you should switch them to public schools," I replied, unperturbed. Or maybe you should look for a job, Gabby, because as far as I know, you haven't worked a single day since you married my son. She sobbed harder. Devin hugged her, but he looked at me with a mix of anger and desperation. Kendall stood up as well. You can't do this. It's our money. It's part of our inheritance. I shook my head. It's not your inheritance until I die, and according to the trust rules, I can modify the distribution conditions whenever I deem it necessary. Marcus stood up abruptly. This is abuse. We're going to sue you. We're going to challenge the trust. I looked at him without fear. Go ahead. But I warn you, the trust was designed by the best corporate lawyers in the state. It is completely protected, and a lawsuit could take years to resolve. Do you have money to pay lawyers for years? He clenched his fists, but said nothing more. He knew they didn't have that money, not without the monthly transfers. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out and saw an email from Olivia. Documents ready for signature. I looked at my children and their spouses. All of them were watching me with faces full of despair. Is there anything else you need to know? I said, putting the phone away. The corporate credit cards you use, the ones with $10,000 limits each, are also linked to my accounts. Kendall's eyes widened in horror. No. Yes, I confirmed. And starting today, all those cards are canceled. Devin took a step toward me. Mom, please, you're overreacting. We can talk about this. We can come to an agreement. I looked at him with sadness. Yesterday was the time to talk. Yesterday was the time to come to an agreement. But you chose to humiliate me. You chose to treat me as if I were worthless, as if my existence were a nuisance that needed to be eliminated. I sat down again. Now, you live with the consequences. Gabby knelt in front of me, literally kneeling. Please, Eleanor, think about your grandchildren. They're not to blame for this. I looked down at her. My grandchildren will be fine, and if you truly love them, you will find a way to give them what they need by working, like all normal people do. Kendall was trembling. And what are we going to do? How are we going to live? I shrugged. That's exactly what I asked myself yesterday, when you told me you wouldn't support me anymore. I guess you'll have to find out for yourselves. Marcus walked toward the door. This isn't over, he said, his voice menacing. You'll see. I didn't move. The door is open. You can leave whenever you like. He left, slamming the door behind him. Kendall followed him, but before she went out, she looked at me with eyes full of tears. I never thought you were capable of something like this, she said, her voice breaking. I held her gaze. I never thought you were capable of what you did yesterday. But here we are. Devin and Gabby stayed a moment longer. He seemed to want to say something, but couldn't find the words. Finally, he took his wife by the arm, and they walked toward the door. Before leaving, Devin turned back. What now, Mom? Is this it? Are we nothing to you anymore? I took a deep breath before answering. You decided I was nothing to you. I am simply responding in kind. They left. I heard them go out. I heard their cars starting, driving away. I remained seated in the empty living room in the silence they had left behind. But this time, the silence didn't weigh on me. I felt light, free. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I took out my phone and opened Olivia's email. The documents were there, waiting for my electronic signature. Documents that would permanently change the structure of the trust. Documents that would establish new rules, new conditions, and a new distribution of assets. I read each page carefully. Everything was exactly as we had discussed. A portion of the estate would be allocated to a charitable foundation. Another portion would be reserved for the grandchildren, but under my administration until they turned 25. And the rest would remain under my absolute control to be used as I deemed appropriate. My children would receive their inheritance, yes, but only the basics, only a fraction of what they expected, and only after my death. I signed each document, one after another. Each signature was an act of liberation. Each signature was a declaration of independence. When I finished, I sent everything back to Olivia. "Done," I wrote. "It's official now." She replied almost immediately. "Documents received and filed. Changes are effective immediately." "Congratulations, Mrs. Shaw. You made a very brave decision." I left the phone on the table and leaned back in my chair. Brave. Perhaps. Or maybe it was just time to stop being invisible. The next 3 days were completely silent. Neither Kendall nor Devin called me, not a message, not a visit, nothing. It was as if they had disappeared from the map, but I knew they were out there trying to process what had happened, trying to find a solution to their new reality, a reality where they no longer had unlimited access to the money they had always taken for granted. I used that time for myself. I read books I had postponed. I walked in the garden. I cooked my favorite meals. I slept without that constant weight on my chest. On the 4th day, a Saturday morning, a certified letter arrived. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. I opened it calmly, sitting in my study with a cup of tea beside me. The letter was exactly what I expected. A legal notification from Kendall Shaw and Devin Shaw requesting a complete audit of the family trust and questioning my capacity to administer it. They alleged financial irregularities and possible manipulation by third parties. I smiled slightly. How predictable they were. I picked up my phone and called Olivia. She answered on the second ring. "Good morning, Mrs. Shaw." I told her about the letter. I heard her dry laugh on the other end of the line. "I expected it," she said. "In fact, I received a call from that same firm late yesterday afternoon. I informed them that all trust accounts are in perfect order and that we have complete documentation for every movement over the last 20 years. I also reminded them that any audit requires a court order, and that can take months to secure." "And what did they say?" I asked. Olivia sighed. "They got nervous. I think they expected me to panic or to give in to the pressure, but when I explained that the trust is completely protected and that you have absolute authority according to the original will, they fell silent. They ended the call by saying they would evaluate their options. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Perfect. We'll keep everything in order. If they want a legal war, let them have it, but they won't find anything." I hung up and stared at the letter for a moment longer. My own children trying to have me declared incapable, trying to take control of what I myself had built. The pain of that betrayal was deep, but it no longer surprised me. I had learned in these last few days that people show their true colors when money is involved. I tore the letter into small pieces and threw it in the trash. It wasn't worth keeping. It wasn't worth giving it more importance than it had. That same afternoon, while I was reading in the living room, the doorbell rang. I peered through the window before opening. It was Gabby, alone, without Devin. Her face was haggard, with pronounced dark circles under her eyes, and a look of defeat I had never seen on her before. I hesitated for a moment whether to open it or not, but something in her posture, something in the way she looked at the ground, made me change my mind. I opened the door. "Gabby," I said, without showing emotion. She looked up. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. "Eleanor, please, I need to talk to you." I stepped aside and let her in. We walked in silence to the living room. She sat on the edge of the sofa with her hands clasped in her lap. I sat across from her, waiting. "I don't know where to start," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I was part of everything that happened, but I'm desperate." I looked at her without saying anything. She continued, "Devin and I are on the brink of ruin. Our credit cards are maxed out. We're 3 months behind on the children's private school tuition. The bank is threatening to repossess the car. We have no savings because we always lived off that monthly transfer. We never thought it would stop one day." Her tears began to fall again. "The children don't understand why they suddenly can't have their piano lessons, their swimming lessons, or why we can't go out to eat on weekends anymore." I listened in silence. Part of me felt compassion. Part of me felt only a deep sadness for what things could have been and weren't. "And Devin?" I asked finally. "Where is he?" Gabby wiped her tears with the back of her hand. He's working. He got a job at a consulting firm. It doesn't pay as much as we hoped, but it's something. I'm looking for work, too. I updated my resume after 10 years, but no one has called me yet. She fell silent for a moment, as if gathering courage. Eleanor, I've come to ask you not to restore the full transfers, but just something. Whatever you can. $500, a month, 1,000, whatever, just until we get back on our feet. I looked her in the eye. And why should I do that, Gabby? Give me a reason. She swallowed. Why? Because we're family. Because your grandchildren aren't to blame for what we did. Because I know deep down you're not cruel. I stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, the gardener was still working. Life continued. Do you know how much my monthly prescriptions cost? I asked without turning to look at her. $480 every month. And you told me you wouldn't pay for them anymore, that it was my problem. I turned around. Do you know how much I spend on groceries a month? Maybe $300. And you said it was a waste, that I should learn to live with less. Gabby bowed her head. I know we were awful. We were unfair. And I'm sorry, truly. I'm sorry. I returned to my chair. Are you sorry because it was cruel? Or are you sorry because now you are suffering the consequences? She didn't answer. She had no answer. I sighed. I'm going to tell you something, Gabby, and I want you to tell Devin, Kendall, and Marcus. I will not give you money. Not $500, not 1,000, nothing. Because you need to learn what it means to earn a living. You need to understand the value of work, effort, and sacrifice. But, she tried to interrupt. I raised my hand. I'm not finished. However, there is something I will do. I will directly pay for my grandchildren's private school tuition. I will not give the money to you. I will pay the monthly fees directly to the institutions, because the children should not suffer for their parents' mistakes. Gabby's eyes lit up with hope. Really? I nodded. But with one condition. You have to prove to me that both of you are working. I want to see pay stubs. I want proof that you are making a real effort to get ahead. She nodded quickly. Yes, whatever it takes. I promise we'll both work. I looked at her seriously. And another condition. I want you to withdraw that ridiculous lawsuit you filed, that accusation that I am being manipulated or that I am incapable. Because if you continue with that, then everything is over. Not a single cent for anything. Understood? Gabby paled. I didn't know about that lawsuit. It was Kendall and Marcus's idea. Devin only signed because Kendall convinced him. Then have him withdraw it, I said firmly. You have until Monday. If I don't see that the lawsuit has been withdrawn by Monday, my offer to pay the tuition disappears. Gabby stood up. I'll talk to Devin. I promise you. We will withdraw it. She walked toward the door, but before leaving, she stopped. Eleanor, truly, I'm sorry. I wish I could go back in time and change everything we said that night. I looked at her without expression. Me too. But we can't. We can only move forward with the consequences of our decisions. She left. I closed the door behind her and returned to my chair. I felt tired, not physically, but emotionally. This situation was draining me in ways I hadn't expected, but I knew I had to remain firm. I couldn't give in now, not after having come this far. My phone rang. It was a message from Olivia. Updates on the rental properties, tenants paid on time, $7,000 deposited. Any special instructions? I replied, allocate $2,000 to the foundation. Keep the rest in the reserve account. She confirmed the instruction. The foundation. That had been my idea for some time, a foundation to help older women in vulnerable situations. Women who, like I could have been, found themselves alone, without resources, abandoned by their own families. I wanted something good to come out of all this. I wanted my pain to have a purpose. On Monday morning, I received notification that the lawsuit had been withdrawn. The law firm sent a formal letter discontinuing all accusations. I called Olivia to confirm. "I saw it," she said. "They withdrew everything. Officially, there is no longer any legal action against you." That afternoon, Gabby sent me a photo. It was a job contract. She had secured employment at a private school as an administrative assistant. The salary wasn't much, $2,800, $2,800 a month, but it was a start. "I start next week," her message read. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity." I didn't reply, but that same afternoon, I contacted my grandchildren's schools and paid the past due tuition. I also paid the next 3 months in advance, not for them, but for the children. Always for the children. 2 more weeks passed before I heard from Kendall again. 2 weeks in which I had begun to quietly rebuild my life. I had started attending a book club for women my age. I had resumed my yoga classes that I had abandoned years ago. I had begun to feel alive again. I felt stronger, more self-assured, and for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly all night without waking up with anxiety. On a Tuesday afternoon, as I was returning from my yoga class, I saw Kendall's car parked in front of my house. She was sitting in the driver's seat with her hands on the steering wheel, looking straight ahead. It wasn't the luxury car she used to drive. It was a more modest, older model. I parked in the driveway and got out of my car. Kendall did the same. We looked at each other over the hood of the vehicles. She looked different, thinner, with her hair less styled, without that sheen of arrogance that had always characterized her gaze. "Mom," she said, her voice soft. I didn't reply. I just waited. She walked toward me slowly. "Can we talk?" I nodded and walked toward the front door. She followed me in silence. We went into the living room and sat down in the same places where everything had begun weeks ago. But now the atmosphere was completely different. There was no longer tension, just a kind of mutual weariness, a resignation to face the reality of what had happened. "Marcus and I are getting a divorce," she said without preamble. I looked at her without surprise. Somehow I already knew. "When the money ran out," she continued, "when the card stopped working, when we had to sell the car, when we lost the country club membership, everything fell apart. We started fighting, first about the debts, then about everything else. He blamed me, I blamed him, and it went on until there was nothing left." She fell silent for a moment, staring at her hands. "We had to sell the house. Well, the bank practically forced us. We were behind on the mortgage. What we got barely covered the debts. Now I'm living in a small 2-bedroom apartment. Nothing like what we had before." She looked up at me. "And before you ask, I'm working. I got a job at a boutique. I sell clothes. I earn commission on every sale. Some days are good, others not so much." I listened without interrupting. She continued. "Marcus is working too. He drives for a rideshare app. He says it's temporary, that he's looking for something better, but the truth is, neither of us has any real experience in anything. We spent years living off that money you gave us, and we never learned to do anything useful." Her voice broke. "We never learned to value what we had." Tears began to roll down her cheeks, silent tears she made no attempt to hide. "Mom, I've come to tell you that you were right. About everything. We were ungrateful. We were cruel. We treated you as if you were worthless, when, in reality, you were the one holding everything up. And the worst part is we knew it. Deep down, we always knew. But it was easier to pretend we were the generous ones, that we were the ones supporting you." She wiped her tears with the sleeve of her blouse, a simple, ordinary blouse, nothing like the designer brands she used to wear. "Do you know what's saddest?" she asked. "I lost more than money. I lost my marriage. I lost my dignity. I lost years of my life pretending to be someone I wasn't. But most of all, I lost your respect, and that's what hurts the most." I remained seated, observing her. Part of me wanted to get up and hug her. Part of me wanted to comfort her. as I had done so many times when she was a child. But another part of me, a stronger part, knew that this moment was necessary, that these tears were part of the process, that the pain she was feeling was the only way she would truly understand what she had done. So I didn't move. I just waited for her to calm down. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were swollen and red. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said in a hoarse voice. "I don't know if I could forgive something like this if I were in your place. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, I'm sorry." I took a deep breath before speaking. "When did you realize?" I asked. She looked at me confused. "Realize what?" I clarified. "When did you realize you had made a mistake?" Kendall looked down. "I think it was when we had to sell the living room furniture. That furniture that cost $30,000, $30,000. We had to sell it for $10,000 because we needed to pay the water and electricity bill. And as I watched them load it onto the truck, I thought of you. I thought of how simply you lived while we squandered money on things we didn't need. I thought of all the times we saw you wearing the same clothes, carrying the same old handbag, while we bought new things every month. And there," she continued, "I realized that you weren't the one living at our expense. It was us. It was always us. And all that resentment we felt toward you was nothing more than disguised guilt. Guilt because deep down we knew we were abusing your generosity, that we were taking advantage of your love. And instead of thanking you, we attacked you. We made you feel small so we could feel big." I nodded slowly. "At least now you understand." Kendall wiped her face with the sleeve of her blouse. "Do you know what's saddest?" she asked. "I lost more than money. I lost my marriage. I lost my dignity. I lost years of my life pretending to be someone I wasn't. But most of all, I lost your respect, and that's what hurts the most." I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I prepared 2 cups of tea. I returned and offered one to Kendall. She took it with trembling hands. We sat in silence for a moment, sipping our tea. The silence was no longer awkward. It was simply honest. "I haven't lost all my respect for you," I said finally. She looked up, surprised. "At least you had the courage to come here, to face what you did, to tell the truth. That counts for something." Kendall let out a shaky sigh. "Have you heard anything from Devon?" she asked. I shook my head. "Gabby came a few weeks ago. I told her I would pay the children's tuition directly, but I haven't heard anything from Devon. Not a call, not a message." Kendall nodded. "He's angry, very angry. He says what you did was unfair, that you left us out on the street, that a mother doesn't do that." I felt a sharp pang of pain in my chest, but I didn't show it. A mother also doesn't deserve to be treated the way I was treated. Devon needs to understand that before we can talk. Kendall drank more tea. "He's working too, and Gabby got a job, but he won't accept reality. He still believes all this is temporary, that somehow everything will go back to the way it was." "It won't go back," I said firmly. "It will never be the way it was." Kendall nodded. "I know. I've accepted it, but he hasn't yet." We fell silent again. We finished our tea. Kendall stood up. "I should go. I have a shift at the boutique in an hour." I stood up too. We walked to the door together. Before leaving, Kendall stopped. "Mom, do you think you can ever forgive me?" I looked her in the eyes. "I don't know, Kendall. Forgiveness isn't something you can force. It takes time. It requires more than just apologies. It requires real change, actions, not just words." She nodded. "I understand. And I'm going to show you that I've changed. I don't know how long it will take, but I'm going to show you." She turned to leave, but stopped again. "And the trust, the changes you made are permanent?" I nodded. "Yes, they are permanent. Most of the money will go to a foundation I'm creating, a foundation to help older women in difficult situations, women who were abandoned by their families, women who have no one." Kendall swallowed. "And us? What will we receive?" I looked at her seriously. "You will receive a share, a fair share, but not the millions you expected. Perhaps $200,000 each when I pass away. Enough for you to have something, but not enough for you to fall back into the same mistakes." She nodded slowly, processing the information. "And if we show that we've changed, if we work hard and rebuild our lives?" I shrugged. "Then you will have your own achievements to be proud of. You will have lives you built with your own hands, and that will be worth more than any inheritance." Kendall looked at me with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "You're right," she whispered. "You are absolutely right." I watched her walk to her car, get in, and start the engine. I watched her drive away down the street, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something akin to hope. Maybe not everything was lost. Maybe, with time and effort, we could rebuild something of what we had. But this time, it would be different. This time, it would be based on mutual respect, honesty, and a real understanding of who each of us was. I returned to my study and opened my laptop. I had an email from Olivia. "Mrs. Shaw, the documents for the foundation are ready. We just need to define the official name and the logo. Do you have a preference?" I thought for a moment. Then I typed my response. "Call it the Invisible Women Foundation, because we all deserve to be seen. We all deserve to be valued, regardless of our age." Olivia replied quickly. "Perfect. That's a powerful name. I will proceed with the registration." I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. I looked out the window at the garden. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that way too. Beautiful, peaceful, whole. I didn't need my children's approval to feel valuable. I didn't need their money because it had always been mine. I didn't need their apologies to move forward with my life. But if those genuine apologies came one day, if they demonstrated with actions that they had changed, then maybe, just maybe, we could start over. Not as we were before, but as something new, something stronger, something built on truth instead of convenient lies. That night, I slept soundly, without nightmares, without anxiety, only with the certainty that I had made the right decisions, that I had defended my dignity, and that I would never again allow anyone to make me feel invisible. 3 months after that conversation with Kendall, my life had taken a course I never imagined. The Invisible Women Foundation was officially registered and functioning. We had helped 12 women in difficult situations, women who had been abandoned, scorned, and forgotten by their own families. We provided them with temporary financial support, legal advice, and, most importantly, we restored their dignity. Every story I heard reminded me that I was not alone, that what had happened to me was happening to many others. One Thursday afternoon, while reviewing the foundation documents in my study, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors. I peered through the window and saw Devin standing on the porch, alone without Gabby. His hands were in his pockets, and he was looking down at the ground. I hesitated for a moment. It had been months since we had spoken. Since that terrible meeting, I hadn't had any contact with him, but something in his posture, something in the way he waited, made me open the door. "Mom," he said when he saw me. His voice sounded different, softer, more humble. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without saying anything. We went into the living room. He sat on the edge of the sofa, just as Kendall had done months ago. I took my usual seat. I waited for him to speak. Devin ran his hands over his face. He looked tired, older. "I don't know how to start this," he said finally. "I've been rehearsing what I was going to say for weeks, but now that I'm here, all the words are gone." "Start at the beginning," I told him calmly. He nodded. "The beginning. The beginning was when I failed you, when I treated you like you didn't matter, when I allowed Kendall to take control of that conversation and I didn't say anything to defend you." He looked up at me. His eyes were bright, as if he were holding back tears. "Mom, I've spent these months thinking about everything, about how we got to that point, about how we became such awful people." He stood up and walked toward the window. "Do you know what's the worst part? I knew. I always knew we lived off your money. I always knew that $12,000 monthly came from you. But it was easier to pretend we were the generous ones. It was easier to believe our own lie. He turned to look at me. And when Kendall proposed that meeting, that conversation where we were going to tell you we wouldn't support you anymore, I knew it was wrong. I knew it in my heart. But I didn't have the courage to object. He returned to the sofa and sat down. Gabby told me. She told me we were making a mistake, that we were being cruel, but I didn't listen to her. I was too busy trying to impress Kendall, trying to prove that I too was strong, that I too could make tough decisions. He let out a bitter laugh. What an idiot I was. The only tough decision I should have made was defending my own mother. I listened in silence. Devin continued. These months have been the hardest of my life, working 12 hours a day in an office where I'm the oldest and least experienced employee, watching Gabby cry when we had to tell the kids we couldn't go on vacation this year, having to explain to them why we no longer lived in the big house, why Dad no longer had the nice car. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. But you know what I learned through all of this? I learned the value of work, the value of hard-earned money, and most of all, I learned to value you. He was silent for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Mom, I haven't come to ask you to reinstate the transfers. I haven't come to beg for money. I've come to ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness for treating you like a burden. Forgiveness for making you feel invisible. Forgiveness for not being the son you deserved. Tears began to stream down his cheeks, uncontrolled. And I've come to tell you that I admire you. I admire your strength. I admire that you had the courage to put us in our place, because we needed it. God, how we needed it. I felt something move in my chest, something that had been frozen for months. Do you really understand, Devin, or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? He looked me directly in the eyes. I understand, Mom. I truly understand. And if it takes the rest of my life to prove it to you, I will. But I don't want to live with this guilt anymore. I don't want to be the person I was. I stood up and walked over to the family photos on the cabinet. I picked up one where Devin was 5 years old, and I was holding him in my arms. We were both smiling. Do you remember this day? I asked him. He came closer and looked at the photo. That's the day you took me to the park. You bought me that huge ice cream cone that stained all my clothes. I smiled slightly. Yes, and your father got angry because you ruined your new shirt, but I didn't care. All I cared about was seeing you happy. I put the photo back in its place. For years, all I cared about was seeing you happy, you and Kendall. I gave you everything I could, and when I couldn't give any more, I found a way to give a little more. I turned to look at him. But you didn't see me. You didn't see my sacrifices. You didn't see my love. You only saw what you could get. Devin bowed his head. I know, and I can never make up for that. It's not about making up for it, I said, walking back to my chair. It's about learning, changing, and being better people. I sat down. And how is Gabby? Devin sat down too. She's good. She's working at the school. She likes it. She says that for the first time in years, she feels useful. And the kids are doing well too. They adjusted better than we expected. They don't ask for things all the time anymore. They no longer take it for granted that everything will come easy. I nodded. That's good. Children are resilient, and this experience, though difficult, will teach them valuable lessons. Devin leaned forward. Mom, there's one more thing I want to tell you. Gabby and I have been saving. It's not much, only $100 a month. But we want to give you something back. We know we can never repay everything you gave us, but we want to try. I raised my hand. I don't want your money, Devin. Keep it. Use it for your family, for your children. He insisted. But we need to do this. We need to feel like we're paying off our debt to you. I shook my head. You don't owe me money. You owed me respect. You owed me dignity. And that is not paid with money. It is paid with actions, with real change. Devin fell silent, processing my words. Then he asked, his voice trembling, "Do you think we can ever have a mother-son relationship again?" I took a deep breath. "I don't know, Devin. The damage was very deep, the wounds very painful. But I've seen changes in Kendall. I've seen that she's working, that she's trying to be a better person. And if you do the same, if you demonstrate with actions that you have changed, then maybe, just maybe." He nodded, wiping his tears. "That's all I can ask for. A chance." He stood up. "I won't take up any more of your time. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, that I'm working on being better, and that I hope to earn your trust again someday." He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. "Oh, and Mom, I heard about the foundation, about what you're doing for those women. It's beautiful. It's exactly the kind of thing Dad would have been proud to see." Those words touched me more than I expected. My husband. He would have been proud, or perhaps disappointed by how his children treated me. Probably both. "Thank you," I said simply. Devin left and closed the door softly behind him. I remained seated in the living room for a long time, thinking, feeling, processing everything that had happened in these months. That night, while I was preparing dinner, I received a message from Kendall. "Mom, Devin called me. He told me he went to see you. I'm glad he did. I also want you to know that I'm still working on being better. I'm going to therapy. I'm learning about myself, about why I acted the way I did. I still have a long way to go, but I want you to know I'm trying. I love you." I read the message several times. I love you. It had been months since I heard those words from my children. I didn't know if I was ready to say them back, but at least it was a start. I replied, "I'm glad you're seeking help. Keep going. Change takes time, but it is possible." I didn't say I love you back. Not yet. But I didn't close the door completely either. A week later, I was in the foundation office when Olivia walked in with a folder. "Mrs. Shaw, I have the final figures for the quarter. The foundation has helped 18 women so far. We've spent $45,000 in direct support. The results are incredible. Many of them are already back on their feet, working, rebuilding their lives." I smiled. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Olivia sat across from me. And there's something else. We received an anonymous donation of $3,000. $3,000. We don't know who made it, but the message said, "So that other mothers never feel invisible." I felt a lump in my throat. I didn't know who had made that donation, but I had my suspicions. Maybe Kendall, maybe Devin, maybe both. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the message was getting through, that something was changing. The months continued to pass. The foundation grew. We helped more women. I became more involved in community activities. I made new friends, women my age who had been through similar situations, women who understood. And slowly, very slowly, I began to rebuild my relationship with my children. It wasn't like before. It would never be like before. But it was something new, something more honest, something based on mutual respect rather than obligation or convenience. Kendall continued working at the boutique. She was eventually promoted to manager. Devin was promoted at his firm. Gabby continued at the school and began studying to earn her master's degree in education. All of them were building real lives, lives earned through their own efforts. And I was proud of that, more proud than I had ever been when they were living off my money without doing anything. One afternoon, almost a year after that terrible meeting, we were all gathered again in my living room, but this time it was different. My children brought food they had prepared themselves. They brought my grandchildren, who hugged me with genuine affection. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were a family. Not perfect, with wounds that were still healing, but a real family. Kendall approached me before leaving that night. "Mom, thank you," she said, "for not giving up on us, for giving us that tough but necessary lesson, for loving us enough to set boundaries." I hugged her, and this time when I whispered, "I love you," I meant it. Devin did the same. He hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "You are the strongest woman I know, and one day I hope to be half as brave as you." When everyone left, I remained seated in my living room, looking at the photos, remembering the journey. From that terrible night to this moment of peace, it hadn't been easy. It had hurt more than I imagined, but it had been worth it. I had rediscovered myself. I had recovered my dignity. I had learned that true love sometimes requires tough decisions, that setting boundaries is not cruelty, but survival, and that it is never too late to start over. I got up and walked to my study. I opened my laptop and started typing. I wrote my story, the story of a woman who was made invisible by her own family and who decided to make herself visible again. I didn't know if anyone else would read it someday, but I needed to write it. I needed to document that this had happened and that I had survived. More than survived, I had prospered. The sun was setting outside, painting the sky with its usual colors. I looked out the window at the garden I loved so much, at the house that was mine, at the life I had rebuilt, and I smiled, a genuine, deep smile, full of peace. Because finally, after so many years, I felt complete. I felt seen. I felt valuable. Not because my children told me so, not because I had money, but because I knew it myself. And that was the only thing that truly mattered. 2 years have passed since that night that changed everything. 2 years since I spoke that simple yet powerful word, denied. 2 years since I decided that my dignity was worth more than maintaining a false peace. And as I sit here in the garden I love so much, with a cup of coffee in my hands and the morning sun caressing my face, I can say with absolute certainty that I made the right decision. The Invisible Women Foundation now has 3 branches. We have helped over 120 women recover their autonomy, their dignity, their lives. Every story I hear is different, but they all share the same core. Women who were discarded, ignored, treated as if their value had expired along with their youth. Women who, like me, had to learn to value themselves when no one else would. And seeing them flourish, seeing them recover their strength, is the greatest gift I could have given myself. Olivia is still my right hand. She is no longer just my attorney or manager. She is my friend, my confidant, the person who was there when everything collapsed, and who is still here now that everything has been rebuilt. A few weeks ago, she told me something that stuck with me. Eleanor, what you did wasn't revenge. It was justice. There's a difference. She is right. I never sought to destroy my children. I only sought for them to understand, to wake up, to become the people they should have always been. My children. It's funny how our relationship has evolved. Kendall is now the owner of her own boutique, small, modest, but entirely hers. I visited her a month ago and saw the pride in her eyes when she showed me every corner of the place. She introduced me to her employees. She told me about her expansion plans, about how she is saving every penny to achieve them. She is no longer the arrogant woman who depended on someone else's money to feel important. She is a real businesswoman, building something with her own hands. Devin finished his master's degree in business administration while working. He showed me his diploma with tears in his eyes. I did it, Mom, without anyone's help. I did it. And I felt a surge of pride so deep it almost choked me. This was the son I always knew he could be, not the man who lived on appearances, but the man who fought, who strived, who built. Gabby also finished her degree. She is now a full-time teacher and loves it. She says that for the first time, she understands what it means to earn something through her own merit. I see them every 2 weeks. Family dinners where everyone contributes, where no one expects me to pay for everything, where conversations are real, not superficial. We talk about their struggles, their achievements, their fears, and I share mine too, because now we are equals. I am no longer the silent provider. I am simply their mother, and they are simply my children. No debts, no resentments, just people trying to do better. My grandchildren come to visit me on Saturdays. I teach them to cook, to work in the garden, to value simple things. The oldest, who is now 12 years old, told me recently, "Grandma, my friends say their grandparents give them money all the time, but I prefer what you give me." I asked him what that was, and he replied, "Your time. your stories, your lessons. I cried that night. I cried because that boy understood something that his parents took 40 years to grasp. I still live in my house, the house they wanted me to sell, the house they said was too big for me, but now it is full of life in ways it never was before. On Tuesdays, I have my book club here. On Thursdays, yoga classes in the garden. On Sundays, board meetings for the foundation. This house is no longer a symbol of loneliness. It is a space of community, purpose, and life. The money, that money that caused so much pain, I now use it consciously. I live comfortably, without excessive luxuries, but without privations. I invested a considerable portion in the foundation. Another portion I allocated to an education fund for my grandchildren, which they will have access to when they turn 25, if they demonstrate responsibility and maturity. And I manage the rest with care, knowing that every dollar represents work, effort, and decisions. I have learned so much in these 2 years. I've learned that silence is not peace, that giving in is not loving, that allowing abuse, even if it comes from your own children, is not being a good mother, but being an accomplice to their moral deterioration. I have learned that people only change when they face real consequences, that words without actions mean nothing, and that forgiveness is a process, not an event. I have also learned about myself. I have discovered that I am stronger than I believed, that I have a voice, that I have power, that my life doesn't end when my children grow up, and that at 69 years old, I can start new projects, make new friends, and discover new passions. I have learned that age is not a social death sentence. It is simply another stage, and it can be as vibrant and meaningful as any other. My health is good. I take my prescriptions religiously, the same prescriptions they said they wouldn't pay for anymore. Medications that I now pay for with my own money without depending on anyone. I go to the gym 3 times a week. I eat well. I sleep soundly. My doctor says my indicators are better than they were 5 years ago. It turns out that the stress of living with constant resentment and humiliation was worse for my health than any physical ailment. There are still difficult days when I remember that terrible night and feel the pain again, days when I wonder how my own children could treat me that way. But those days are less and less frequent, and when they arrive, I know how to handle them. I call a friend, I work in the garden, I read, I write. I remind myself that I survived, that I didn't just survive, I prospered. Last month, the foundation received recognition from the municipal government, an award for social work. I went up on stage to receive it, and from there, I saw my children in the audience, applauding, crying with pride, and in that moment, I understood that everything had been worth it, not just for them, but for me, for the 120 women we helped, for all those who will come after. Someone recently asked me if I regret anything, if I would have done things differently, and the answer is complex. I regret waiting so long, allowing them to treat me poorly for so long, and being invisible when I should have been visible. But I do not regret the decision I made that night. I do not regret saying denied, because that word, that simple word, was the beginning of everything, the beginning of my liberation. I look toward the future now with hope. I have plans. I want to expand the foundation to other cities. I want to write a book about my experience. I want to travel, to see places I always dreamed of visiting. I want to continue growing, learning, and living, because now I know something I didn't know before. My life is mine. Not my children's, not my responsibilities, mine. And I have the right, the duty even, to live it fully. The wounds have healed, not completely. Some scars will always remain, but they no longer hurt as they did before. And I have learned that scars are not weaknesses. They are proof of survived battles. They are maps of our growth. They are reminders of our strength. My scars remind me that I am a survivor, and I can survive anything. This morning, while I was making my coffee, Kendall called me, just to say hello, just to tell me she loved me. No asking for anything, no needing anything, just connecting. And those calls, those small, genuine connections, are worth more than all the $12,000 a month I once gave them. Because now, what we share is real, it is earned, It is chosen. I get up from my garden chair. The coffee has gone cold, but it doesn't matter. I walk barefoot on the grass, feeling the earth beneath my feet. I close my eyes and breathe deeply. The air smells of jasmine, wet soil, and possibility. I open my eyes and look at my house, my sanctuary, my kingdom, and I smile. Because I am Eleanor Johnson Shaw. I am 69 years old, and my life is just beginning. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.